It's a spring at the lake. Flowers are starting to pop up out of the ground. The birds are singing. And I've got a couple of really cool cottage decor items that totally speak to spring, floral, birds, all of the things that we love. The first project is this little wall shelf that I picked up at a thrift store. It was painted brown already. It had a little metal star at the top, which I had JR remove. So I'm going to give it a couple coats of Fusion's Little Whale for a pretty pale blue color. What are you doing, honey?
Dirty work.
The dirty work? Yes. So we can get this video out, right?
Yep.
So this I found at a thrift store. This piece right here, it had that metal star on it, which you removed. But all in all, it's a pretty solid wood piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I paid like $7.99 for it or something. Could you build it for that?
No.
While that paint is drying, I'm going to go ahead and use IOD molds. I'm using Birdsong, Conservatory labels, and Dainty Flourishes. I'm not exactly sure which birds I'm going to use. I think these projects will develop kind of as I go. So I'm going to go ahead and cast all of them because I know I will put them to use. I think that I'll also use this pretty detailed oval mold. And then while I'm at it, I think that I'll be using these flourishes on all three of my pieces. This particular mold is so delicate. Of course, that's what makes it so pretty. So normally I would cast them in resin just to make life easier, but I decided I'm going to go ahead and do the air dry clay because I do want these to have an older look, so I don't mind if they crack or come apart in pieces. So what I do is make sure that there's plenty of cornstarch, and then you want to make sure that clay is pressed into place and make sure that you have removed any clay from the micro rim area. Then very, very gently and slowly release the clay from the mold onto your flat surface. I'm doing a little bit of a dry fit right now on my wall shelf, and then I'll glue these in place with Tite Bond Quick and Thick.
the colors. Summer lonesome dove, folded on the lawn chair in all the colors. Summer
Once the castings have been glued down, I apply a coat of the Fusion Little Whale over the castings and let all of it dry completely. The next day, everything was completely dry and hardened off, and now I'm just going to add a glaze over the entire surface with a mixture of Debbie's DIY Dark and Decrepit Liquid Patina and my Fusion Antiquing Gel. I like the combination of the two different browns. It brings a really nice warm medium brown tone to the glaze effect. So I spread that on with a wet brush, and then I have a damp paper towel handy to wipe away the excess. And I'll sort of blot that away with the paper towel and kind of dab at it so that I don't have brush strokes.
Honeysuckle, fresh cut grass. I could really use some stuff like that.
When the glaze has dried completely, I'm going to come in with a dry brush application of Fusion's Victorian lace and brush lightly over the surface of each of those castings. Then I'll come in with a second coat to brighten things up. Here I'm using sandpaper to distress some of the areas along the edges of this wall shelf, just to give it a little bit more of an aged effect. And then I take a mixture of PENTART's Pigment Fix and the Antique Gold mica powder. I mix those together to create my favorite gold paint, and I'm going to touch up these molds here and there to give them a really pretty golden effect. And last of all, I'm taking a little snippet from one of the Tim Holtz collage papers, and I'm decoupaging that in place on the Conservatory label. And there it is, from thrifted to vintage cottage style wall shelf. Let me know if you could think of another color that would look pretty. This is a wooden oval frame that we thrifted, and I am using the Dainty Flourishes mold again to create some castings to fit around the outside edge of that frame. Once I have the pieces cast, I go ahead and glue them into place with our Tite Bond Quick and Thick glue. I had so much fun creating these pieces for you, and I hope that you are just as inspired as I was when I was making them. I would love it if while you are here watching this video today, you would go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and be sure to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss our next YouTube tutorials. We go live twice a week on Mondays and Wednesdays here on YouTube, in addition to creating edited content for you in a shorter format. After a little cleanup with a Q-tip, I will go ahead and let these castings dry completely. Then I'm going to give them a coat of Fusion's chocolate paint as a base coat to prepare for my next step. I'm Lynn from EJG'S. My passion is not only for creating but for inspiring and instructing next level techniques for home decor in a vintage style. And we hope that you are inspired to create these projects along with us. Have you tried our favorite gold paint? This again is a mixture of the PENTART Pigment Fix mixed with the PENTART Gold Metal Pigment or Antique Gold Metal Pigment. That's what I'm using here. You want to mix those two thoroughly to combine both ingredients. I use about 1 part metal pigment to 3 parts pigment fix. Of course, you can adjust the amount of gold metal pigment powder to adjust the opacity according to your preferences. Then I'm ready to paint, and here I'm applying it kind of in a dabbing motion. I don't mind if some of the brown paint is showing from underneath because I do want this to have a very worn and aged effect. Once the gold paint has dried, I'm coming in with that glaze mixture of the Debbie's DIY Infusion glazes, and I'm going to brush that over the entire surface, making sure that I get into all that detail. Then I'll wipe away the excess with a soft cloth. Set this aside to dry, and we'll come back to this project a little bit later. For this project, I'm using one of the arched wood gallery blanks. I completely forgot to capture the video of how I trimmed away some of the birdsong molds to make them swoop in from the right. That big one there, you can see that I have cut away his tail and part of the wing to make him fit that curve. Then I'm going to apply the Dainty Flourishes castings around the top edge of my frame. I also glued the birds in place. Once the glue had hardened and my air dry clay was also hardened, I went over the entire piece with Fusion's Victorian lace and then gave it a second coat for complete coverage. I let that paint dry overnight. This piece is going to have a very neutral vibe to it. I want it primarily white, so I'm coming in with the Rose Botanical transfer and selecting just a couple of those little whitish yellow creamy colored roses. I've trimmed away a few little bits just to make sure that it fit between the bird's beaks and transferred those in place with the little applicator stick. Then I'm also going to take the second one and layer that over top. I missed the filming of that part of it, but you can see when I'm done here what that looks like with those 2 roses in place. I've also selected a little section of a poem from the IOD transfer, Lover of Flowers. To make a little ribbon banner, I'm using air dry clay, flattening it out, and then rolling it with my brayer to about an 1/8 inch thickness. Then I'll go ahead and take an X-Acto knife to cut out a ribbon shape. Using the Titebond Quick and Thick, I'm going to glue that in place and position it between the bird's beaks. While I was doing this, I was trying to think of what word I wanted to place on the ribbon, and after quite a bit of searching online, I came up with the word Flora Song, the tune that nature hums when flowers and birds unite. Isn't that beautiful? So I took my Apothecary labels stamp from IOD and I spelled out the word Flora Song. Once I positioned the stamps, I pressed them in place using one of the little carrier sheets so that they created a debossed effect into the soft clay. Then I will let that dry overnight. The next day, I'm going to go ahead and do a mix of the Debbie's DIY Dark and Decrepit, Liquid Patina, and Fusion's Antiquing Glaze. And I'll apply this glaze in the same manner that I did on my other projects, just brushing it over the entire surface and wiping away with a damp cloth, leaving enough of the glaze behind to accent those details. You can see that I've added another label at the bottom of the Arched Wood Gallery blank. This is actually from the first generation of IOD label molds. It's one that I happen to have left over, and I thought it was the perfect fit.
You're the rose in a garden, and it shows if I'm honest. You're the leaves in mid-August, and I've come out here to say.
As a final little detail, I used a bit of that Tim Holtz collage paper. I found the word Chopin and thought that was perfectly fitting for this little Flora Song decor piece. I'd love to know what you think of this beautiful cottage decor piece.
That I love you.
JR cut a little piece of masonite to fit inside the oval frame, and I painted that with the Fusion Little Whale light blue color, and I'm going to use the IOD Pastiche stamp to create a pretty little piece of wall decor. Before you use your stamps for the first time, you'll want to make sure that you give them a light sanding to help to condition them so that they'll receive the ink or paint medium. I decided that I was going to use this little taller cloche piece, and I am going to position this exactly how I want it on that oval insert. And I decided to use this pretty little floral stamp that will sit inside of the cloche. When I decided that these were the two pieces that I wanted to use, I go ahead and take one of the IOD thin mounts and create markings so that I make sure that I get my stamp lined up with the top and bottom of the oval and the oval frame. After inking the stamp with IOD's stone gray ink, I place it on the surface, and with one hand I hold the stamp down. With the other hand, I'm going to press the stamp in place and then lift straight up. Each stamp set comes with a set of reusable masks, so I'm going to place the mask to cover the base of the cloche. Then, using IOD's China Blue ink, I am inking that floral stamp, and I'll stamp right over the mask and onto my surface. After pressing the entire stamp over the surface, I'll lift up, and you can see that the mask has some of that China Blue ink on it, but the China Blue ink does not go on the base of the stamped cloche on my project. I decided that I wanted to add a little extra layer of shine to that cloche stamp, so I mixed up some of my favorite gold paint, and then I applied it to a surface, used the IOD brayer, and then I brayered the cloche stamp with that gold paint. Then I'll flip that stamp over and go ahead and press that into place and lift straight up.
Don't wanna sleep tonight at all.
Last, I came in with a tiny little detail brush and painted in a little extra detail with that gold paint on the cloche to really make those details pop.
Fire breath and open sky.
When I'm done using my stamps, I clean the ink off with a wet baby wipe and pop them into an IOD stamp storage envelope, and I have the masks in a separate little plastic envelope. I put them all away so that they're ready to be used for my next project. I really love this pastiche stamp. I decided to add some PENTART FINELINE Crackle to this piece. So I applied the first component and apply that with a dry, clean brush in an even application over the surface. Then you allow that to dry completely before coming in with the second coat, which is that amber colored second component. You want to apply this also with a dry brush over the surface. You don't want that brush to drag. You want to keep that product moving over the surface and then let that dry completely. I allowed this coat to dry overnight and came back the next day to some beautiful crackles. If the cracks are not evident to you by your eyesight, you can apply a little bit of heat from a blow dryer, and sometimes that's just enough to get those fine line crackles to get started. When the second component has dried completely, I want to now show off those crackles. I'm using PENTART's Umber wax paste, applying that into the surface of the project and into those cracks, and then wipe away with a soft cloth.
Sunflowers, high grass, and bare feet. Oh, you each second is a treat. I keep my balance next to you.
I work a section at a time, really pushing that wax down into those fine lines. And once you buff that extra wax away, it really does show off that beautiful crackle finish.
It's not what we know, it's where we go. I grow wings and tell her goodbye. It's not what we see.
With the PENTART Fine Line Crackle, it is very important to remember that to preserve that beautiful crackle finish, you must use a solvent base finish to the surface to protect it. A water-based finish will not work. It'll make it all gummy. For the last step, I am going to apply this little Tim Holtz label for a finishing touch.
I grow wings and tell her goodbye. Oh, it's not what we see, it's what we choose to be. Fire breath.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us here today. I've linked all of the products that I've used in the description box below. You can find them at our brick and mortar shop in Medina, New York, or at EJG'S.com.
Goodbye. It's not what we see, it's what we choose.